In this video, I'm going to teach you how to add some data to a Firestore database. So we are going to start with this app that I have created. This is a shopping list app. So on the home page, a list of shopping items are displayed. So these two items you see here are fetched from a Cloud Firestore database. Now we are going to allow the user to add a new item to this list by clicking on this button. So on clicking this button, we shall display a form and the user will be asked to enter the name of the item and the quantity that he or she wants to purchase. And then on submitting, we shall add the data to a Firestore database. So here is the database of our app. So we have a collection named shopping list. And to this collection, inside this collection, at this moment, we have two items, and we are going to allow the user to add more items here. Now here, I'm assuming that you have already added Firebase to your app. If you have not done that, then there is another video. You will find the link in the description. Follow that and add Firebase to your Flutter project. So this is required. We also have implemented authentication, and we are fetching data from Firestore. So if you want to follow those videos too, then you will find the links below. Otherwise, simply install Firebase in your Flutter project, and then you will be ready to start this tutorial. So let me just give you a brief overview of the structure of the database here. So here inside a Firestore database, you will need to store the individual items in form of something called a document. So these are the documents, and the documents have to be kept inside a collection. So here is a collection. You can start a collection here. You can add a document here, and inside a document you can add a field here itself through this interface, or you can do these things from your app. So here we have one collection. Inside a collection you have to keep the documents. So here we have the documents corresponding to the individual items of our shopping list, and if you take a look at one of the items, you will find that we have a very simple structure for a shopping item. We have two fields. First is the name of the item, and second is the quantity. To be able to interact with the Cloud Firestore database, you have to add this plugin named Cloud Firestore to your Flutter project, and for that you have to run this command flutter pub add Cloud Firestore. And once this plugin gets installed, you will be able to use the functions classes of this package by importing this library Cloud Firestore inside your code. So we are going to load a new page when the user clicks on this floating action button. For that, let us create a new file inside this lib folder. Let's name it add item, and inside we are going to create a new stateful widget. Let's name it add item. Import the material.dart library to be able to access these classes. Now inside the main.dart file, let's find the widget floating action button responsible for displaying the floating action button on the page, and inside the onPress function of this floating action button, we are going to write the code to load the new page that we have created now, the new widget. So we are going to get an instance of the navigator class. We shall call navigator.off, and we shall pass the context to get an instance, and then we shall call the function push. To this function we have to pass an instance of the material page root class, and while creating this instance we have to provide an implementation of a function to the property builder, and this function has a specific syntax. It gets one parameter of type build context, so we have to add a parameter here. Let's name it context, and now from this function we have to return the widget that we want to load. So here we are going to return an instance of the newly created widget. Now let us open this widget. Let us make some changes inside this widget add item. You can keep pressing the control key and then click on this item, and this will take you to the corresponding file, the corresponding code of that selected item. So here we are inside the page, inside the file add item.dart, and we have this widget here. Now from this build function, we are going to return the widget tree for the layout of this page. So let's return a scaffold because we are going to create a material design page and we are going to add an app bar. So pass an instance of the app bar widget to this property app bar of the scaffolds constructor. To this widget app bar, we have to pass a text widget to the property title to display a title on the app bar. To the body of the scaffold, we are going to add a widget which will display some text form fields, some input boxes for the user to enter the name and item of the shopping item that he or she wants to add. So we are going to display the widgets vertically. For that, we have to use the widget column. This widget has a property children, to which we have to pass the widgets that we want to organize vertically inside a column. So we are going to add two text form fields. This widget text form fields helps us in displaying input boxes. So let's add two text form fields, and below these two text form fields we are going to display an elevated button using which the user will be able to submit the entered information, the input information. So on clicking this button, we shall upload the data entered to the Firebase database, Firestore database. So here we shall write the code inside this onPress function, and to the property child we have to pass the widget that we want to display inside the button. So here let's pass a text widget and let's name it submit. Now here inside the onPress function, first of all we shall create a map with the data that the user has entered into this text form fields, and then we shall add that data to the database. For that, we shall call the function add on the collection reference corresponding to our collection, and then we shall pass the map to the function add. Now to be able to get the values entered into the text form fields, we have to add instances of the class called text editing controller to this text form fields. So first of all, we shall create two instances of the text editing controller. So here let us create the first instance of text editing controller. Let us name it controller name, and let us create another and let's name it controller quantity. And now we have to pass these instances of the text editing controllers to the property controller of the text form fields. So to the property controller of the first text form field, let us pass controller name, and to the second pass controller quantity. Now inside this onPress function, let us create a variable of type map. Let us specify the types here. The keys will be string and the values too are going to be string in this case. Let's name it data to save, and now we have to create a map using this curly brackets, and inside this curly brackets we have to specify the key value pairs of the data that we want to store. So we want to store the text entered into the text form field for the name against a field called name, and we are going to do the same for the quantity. This time the name of the field, the key will be quantity. So these are the names with which we want to store the data inside a document on Firebase, on Firestore database, right? So here to the key name, we are going to store controller name dot text, and for the key quantity we are going to pass quantity controller quantity dot text. And now here we have to get the collection reference of our collection shopping list, and we have to call the function add. So first of all at the top we have to import the package Cloud Firestore, and now here inside this onPress function we shall get the collection reference, and for that we have to get an instance of the class Firebase Firestore. So we have to call Firebase Firestore dot instance, and then we can call the different functions on it. So there is a function called collection. This gives us the collection reference corresponding to the collection that we specify here. So we have to specify the name of the collection. In this case, this is shopping list. So if a collection with this name exists on Firestore database, then this will be accessed. Otherwise, a new collection with this name will be created, and then the next operation will be performed on it. So here we are going to access this collection with help of this collection reference. So this function returns an instance of collection reference, and on this collection reference we are going to call the function add, and to this function add we have to pass the map of data. So here in this case it is data to save. Now save the changes, load the app, and now we are ready to try this feature of adding a new element to our shopping list. So here I have opened the database and the app side by side. Now click on this floating action button. This form appears. We should add some hints here. Well, first one is for name, right? So here I'm going to type a name for an item and also add the quantity, and now let us hit this button, submit. And notice that a new item has been added here on the collection shopping list, and it contains the value that we have entered. So the code that we have written is working as expected. Now we have to do a few more things. We can validate this input fields. We can validate to check whether to confirm that the user is not entering anything empty. So we are not going to allow the users to enter empty strings to the database. So the user should enter a name and a quantity. So we can validate that. If you go back, you will notice this here, because we are using a stream builder on this page, so the real-time changes gets reflected here on this list page. Now before validating the input fields, let us first try to display some message on success and on an event of an error. So first of all, let us do that. For clarity, let me break this statement into two statements. So I'll remove this call from this statement, and here I'll assign this to an instance of collection reference. So let us create a variable of type collection reference, as this function collection returns an instance of this class collection reference, and then we are going to call reference.add. Now this function add returns a future, and we can call some callback functions on this. So here there is a callback function named Dan. This gets executed on case of a successful completion of the operation of this function. So inside this we can display a message of success, and there is another callback function named on error. So this gets executed, this gets called when some error occurs. So this is one way of handling the case of a successful completion and a case of an error. But there is another way, and that is with help of the try catch block. So we can enclose this statement inside a try block, and we can handle the errors inside a catch block. So let's put this code, this statement inside a try block, and let's add a catch block here. Now we are going to wait for its completion using the keyword await. So this function is an asynchronous function. This returns a future. So if we add the keyword await, then this execution will wait here until the completion of this function before proceeding to the next statement. So here, if any error occurs during execution of this function, the catch block will get executed in case of an error, and if no error occurs, then this catch block will not get executed, and after completion of this function, the statement below this statement will get executed. So here we can display snack bar, and we can display a message of success, and inside the catch block we can display a message of an error. Now here we are getting an error because for using await inside a function, we have to mark that function as asynchronous with help of the keyword async. We have to add the keyword async before starting the body of this function. So here inside the catch block, we shall write the code to display a snack bar with the error message. So to display snack bar, we have to get an instance of the class scaffold messenger. We have to call scaffold messenger.off, and we have to pass the context, and then we can call the function show snack bar, and to this function we have to pass an instance of the widget snack bar. While creating the instance of the widget snack bar, we have to provide a value for the property content, and here we are going to pass a text widget with the text to be displayed. We can get some information about the error from this argument here, error. So let us also print this. So we are going to use string interpolation to print the value of this argument error. Now in case of a success, we are going to display a similar snack bar with a message of successful addition. So here below this statement, the call to the function add, we are going to add a similar statement. We shall call scaffold messenger, and then we shall display a snack bar, and this time the message will be defined. The text will be defined, item added successfully. So while executing this function, if some error occurs, then the catch block will get executed and this message will get displayed, and if no error occurs, after completion of this function, this statement will get executed and the message of successful addition will be displayed. Now save the changes, load the app, and try to add a new item, and let's see whether we get the snack bars, the messages on the snack bars or not. So I'm going to add one more item. Let's press the button submit, and here we can see the message of successful addition. Now let us come back to the code and notice this underline here. If you take your cursor over this text, you will find a message, and it says that do not use build context in async gap. So to fix this, we are going to add an if statement here, and we shall check whether the value of the variable mounted, the boolean mounted, is true or false. If it is false, then we are going to return from this. We are not going to proceed to execute the code below it, and we shall exit this function. If it is true, then only we shall proceed to execute this statement, which involves use of the build context. So once you add this statement, you will notice that the error has disappeared. So this, we were getting this error because this is an asynchronous function. This may take a little longer. So the user presses the button to save the item and this function gets called. It may take a little longer, and before it completes its execution, if the user exits the page, then the build context will no longer be available here, and in such a case we may get some errors. So it is recommended not to use build context in asynchronous gap. So from making an asynchronous call to the completion of the asynchronous call, this is the async gap, and there we should not use a build context. So to add some data to a Firestore database, you have to create a map, you have to add the information in key value pairs, and you have to get the reference, the collection reference of your collection, and then you have to call the function add on the collection reference. You can use try catch block or the callback functions then and on error to handle the situation of successful completion and the situation of an error. So this is all about adding the data to Firestore. Now I'm going to make some changes to the form. I'm going to display some hint in the text boxes, and I'm going to validate the text form fields. If you want to learn that, you can continue the video. Now first of all, let us display some hint text here, and for that we have to use a property called decoration. So the text form field has a property called decoration. To this we have to pass an instance of a class called input decoration, and while creating this instance we have to pass the text to be displayed as a hint to the property hint text. So here we have this property hint text, and I'm going to add a text here. Enter the name of the item. And I'm going to add similar input decoration for the other text form field too. So let's copy this and I'm going to paste it here. The message will be defined, the text will be defined. This time it will be quantity, enter the quantity. Now save this and notice this text being displayed here. Let me also wrap this column by a padding widget to add some padding around the content. And now I'm going to add validator functions to this text form fields. So the widget text form field has a property called validator. This constructor has a parameter called validator, to which we have to pass an implementation of a function, and inside this function we shall write the logic to verify whether the text entered, whether the value entered to the text form fields is correct or not. This gets one argument of type string, nullable string, so this can be null or this can have some value, and inside we can return null to specify that no error has occurred. So if we return null from this function, it will consider that no error has occurred, there is no error in the value entered. So the value entered is a valid input. But if we want to validate, we want to check some of the conditions, then we can add some if statements here. So here we are going to check if value is empty. So if the user tries to submit the form without entering a value for the name of the item, we are going to display a message, an error message. So we shall consider this to be an error, a non-valid input. So here this can be null, so we also have to check whether this is null or not. So if value is equal to null or it is empty, then we are going to return the text to be displayed as an error. So here we are going to return the text, a string. Please enter the item name. So let me repeat once again. So there is a property, there is a parameter called validator, to which we can provide an implementation of a function while creating the instance of text form field. Inside this function we can write the logic to validate the value entered to the text form field. If we return null, then this will be considered as a valid input field. It will be considered that no error has occurred, and if we return something else than null, then the text that we return will be displayed as an error. So in this case, the value, we are checking whether the value is null or it is empty. If one of these conditions are true, then this if block will get executed and this text will be returned. So this is a case of an error, and the error will be displayed here below the text form field on the UI. And if none of these are true, this if block will not get executed and null will be returned, and this will mean that the value entered is a valid input. Now let us do the same for the other text form field too. Let's copy this and paste it here, and this time the text will be different, right? Instead of item name, this will be item quantity. Now we have to execute these validator functions, and for that we have to wrap these text form fields by a widget called form. So we can wrap this column by the widget form, and as this column contains these text form fields, so the form widget will be above this text form fields in the widget tree. So let's wrap this column by the widget form, and this is a stateful widget, so it has a state class called form state, and that class has some useful functions like validate, using which we will be able to execute these validator functions at once. So first of all, to be able to access the form state and call the functions of that class, we have to add a key to the property key of this form widget. So this has a property called key, and to this we have to add a key. So here we have to create a key. So let us create a global key, a variable of type global key, and let's create an instance. We have to specify the type to be form state and pass this key to the property key of the form. Now inside this onPress function, we can access the form state class with help of this key. So we are going to add an if statement here, and we shall use key dot current state, and now we can call the function of this instance current state. So this is the state of the form widget that we have added. So here we have the function called validate. We have other functions too. So in this case we are going to call this function validate. So this function validate returns true when the information entered in the text form fields are correct. So if this returns true, then we are sure that there are no errors and we can proceed with the operation. Now we are getting an error here because this is nullable, and this becomes null when we forget to add the key to the property key of the form state, or we don't have a form itself, the form widget itself. But in this case, we know that we have added the form key, the widget form, and we have specified the key to the property key of the form widget. So we can assert it to be null. So by adding this exclamation here, we can assert it to be null, and then we can call validate, and now this will be true if there are no validation errors. So inside this block we can add this code. Now save the changes and let us run the app. So here is the app, and this is the form. At this moment we have not entered anything here. Now let us try to press the submit button and notice these errors. So we are getting these errors as we are trying to submit the form without entering anything. So in this way we can validate the input, the input entered into the text form fields. So in this case the validation logic is pretty simple, but this can get complex depending on the input, the type of the input. For example, in case of a password, you may have a complex logic here. Now before finishing this video, let us come back to the code once again, and let me show you the return type of this function add. So this function adds one document to the specified collection on a Firestore database, right? And if you take a look at the source code, you can keep pressing the control key and then you can click on this name of the function and you will be taken to the source code. And here you will notice the return type of this function is future of type document reference. So after completion of this function, you will get an instance of this class document reference. So you will be able to use this class to fetch the item, to fetch the information of that particular document that you have entered, and you can display on a page. For example, in this case we can have a details page for the shopping items, and we can get the information of a particular document from the Firestore and we can display those information on a details page.